Right, the one that's yours, take the key now.
What was happening in 1880, and by the time 1887 it was in a building boom, what was happening was a sense of investment in the future. What was happening was an investment in the children of the future, an investment in the future of the colony, an investment in the future of the nation. It took a lot of foresight and a lot of courage for people like Henry Parkes to stand up and say, we will build a public education system that will create an educated, engaged community. That foresight served the people of New South Wales and Australia extraordinarily well for the 127 years since this school has been built. Today, there is no such foresight coming out of the political leaders or the bureaucracy. The New South Wales Government has embarked on a land sale of $230 million worth of public education land, what they call an accelerated land sale. Flog it off as quickly as you can to balance the bottom line of the budget. What they're really saying is we're going to sell off the capital assets to pay the expense of running the state. If you did that, if you sold your own house or part of your own house to pay your ongoing bills, you'd realise pretty quickly you're going to run out of things to sell off. Well, that's exactly where the state of New South Wales is headed. It is a failure of economics 101. It's fundamentally poor economic thinking to sell off the schools like Enmore Public that we see here. There's much more to this. What's really going on here is a total failure of the Department of Education's demographers. Go back a decade and remember that disaster Building the Future. And look at the schools that were scheduled to be closed under Building the Future. Erskineville Public School. It was going to be closed because there weren't enough students. Today, Erskineville Public is bursting at the seams. Tempe High School, bursting at the seams. Hunters Hill High School, bursting at the seams. Every single one of those 6 schools that were scheduled to be closed is bursting at the seams. And all it took was a reinvestment in those schools, a bit of encouragement from the government, some good teachers and a good principal, and those schools went gangbusters. There are plenty of uses for this school. Every time I talk to a public education institution in the inner city, whether it's childcare, whether it's community childcare, or whether it's a TAFE college, or whether it's a high school or a primary school, they say the same thing. They say we're busting at the seams. And if you think it's bad now, wait for 5 or 6 or 8 years. Wait and see what's going to happen when the baby boom, the mini baby boom that we're in the middle of at the moment, when those kids are ready to go to school. Those kids will be bussed out of the inner city because the state government will have sold off schools like this one here. The Department of Education's demographers need to get their heads out of the spreadsheets and come down and have a cup of coffee here in Newtown and Enmore on a Saturday morning. And they need to, instead of counting what's coming through from a census that's now badly out of date, they need to start counting prams and pushes up and down the street here on a Saturday morning. And they'll realise there's a huge latent demand for places like this as public education institutions. We've got a bill before the New South Wales Upper House which would make it impossible to sell this school and schools like it, in fact all public assets, without the approval of both houses of Parliament. It doesn't guarantee a future for a school like this, but what it does guarantee is if politicians are prepared to sell off a school, they need to put their names to it. They need to be prepared to face the electorate at the next election and say, okay, yes, we said that should be sold off. Their names need to be attached to that sell-off. For too long, governments hide behind bureaucracies. They hide away and they allow these sorts of travesties of the future to go ahead. Carmel Tebbutt is not here today. Verity Firth is not here today. That is shameful. They are running away from you and they're running away from what they're doing here. Your presence here today, however, sends them and Nathan Rees and the state government and the Department of Education and New South Wales Treasury a very strong message. A message that we will not, as a community, allow schools like this to be sold off without a fight. And that fight will be had, and I'm confident we will win that fight. Thank you very much indeed.